Hello and welcome to Hooting Mandrels. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Sam.
And today we're going to be continuing our Aetherdrift set review with the color black.
Alright, first up, Ancient Vendetta, 3 and a black, sorcery, choose a card name, search target opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for up to 4 cards with that name and exile them. Then that player shuffles. This is a cranial extraction stone brain type effect. It costs 4 mana, so it's never as good as people think it is, but it'll probably have its place. It does actually just get rid of the cards like surgical extraction and doesn't redraw them like stone brain does, so that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this doesn't have to be a creature card like the end, but it seems fairly expensive,
yeah,
I guess.
Expensive, mostly bad. If there is a combo deck that needs a very specific card to win the game, and that card isn't going to be in play already killing you by turn 4, then you might side this in against it, and it might be okay, but it's mostly bad.
Yeah, all right.
Here's a card that's good.
We already know this card is good, fortunately.
Big fan of Bloodghast.
It's in Standard.
And Pioneer.
And now Pioneer, which is quite a big deal. With Insidious Roots, the stock on that card went way up with this set. We'll get to green later, but yeah, Bloodghast, 2 black, 2/1, Vampire Spirit, creature can't block. This creature has haste as long as an opponent has 10 or less life. Landfall, whenever a land you control enters, you may return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of graveyardy stuff going on. You do need a way to sacrifice this profitably, or it just...
Or mill over them profitably.
Or use the body somehow to... Well, even if you can mill it over, getting it back, you need to be able to then use the body for something, and that something can't be blocking. But it's a good card. It's a lot of fun. You know, maybe there's a lot of graveyard stuff going on. Maybe this brings back the Say Its Name package a little bit. Pitching Altenac to its ability can get back Bloodghasts at instant speed. They can't block, of course, so like, what are you doing with a Bloodghast at instant speed? I don't know. Crewing a vehicle, maybe. But there's cool stuff going on. It's a really fun card. Glimpse the Unthinkable is not in Pioneer, so you can't fully do the like historic timeless version of like Dredgeless Dredge, but Prized Amalgam, Silver Smote Ghoul, those sorts of effects are kind of almost there in Pioneer already. You gotta also just do some sort of vampire sacrificey stuff. Blood Tithe Harvester and Fable of the Mirror Breaker are still cards in... Or Blood Tithe Harvester is still a pretty good beater in Pioneer. It's best friends with Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which allows it to punch up quite a bit. And no Sorin, but maybe Rakdos Vampires could still be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you guys already know the possibilities with this card are quite large. There's a lot to do with it, so you guys can figure that out for yourselves, I guess. Up next, we have Chitin Gravestalker for 5 and a black. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact and or creature card in your graveyard, cycling 2, 5/4, common.
Yeah, so this is reminiscent of these sort of black beans creatures that we get in every set. It's easier to cast, but not as good as something like Hollow Marauder, but as Jeremy said, it is a common, and it's better than the one of those creatures that is at common and still makes the deck, but is the worst of them in Writhing Necromass. The fact that it A, cycles, and B, reduces its cost for artifacts too is, I think, a big deal, as well as obviously Pauper legality. Most formats don't have as efficient of cantripping artifacts as Mishra's Bauble, but putting artifacts in the graveyard is pretty doable. This thing is going to cost 1 mana a lot of the time.
For sure. And, you know, 5/4 and Pauper is a pretty big deal. Like, there is obviously stuff that deals with that, but...
Dies to Galv Blast, but not to Bolt.
Not to Bolt,
Galv Blast and Scred, but not to Bolt. Defile is probably getting there a lot of the time, but you have to, like, make your mana base work for it.
Yeah, I don't know if this card... I mean, I think somebody is going to play it in Pauper. Whether or not it's, like, going to straight to T1 is debatable, but I think that this is a cool card that's going to see play in a lot of formats. Most importantly, Pauper, because that's the most important pop format.
Pauper Affinity has has played Gurmag Angler at times, and this is
better.
Probably just easier to cast for 1 in that deck than Gurmag Angler, right?
And you don't have to give up your graveyard.
Yeah, you keep your graveyard. It probably has 5 artifacts in it. It's probably about as easy, and certainly easier in multiples to cast this than Gurmag Angler for 1 in that deck, if that's the sort of thing you're looking for.
Yeah, 100%. Really cool card. Excited to see it in action.
Next, we have Cryptcaller Chariot. 3 and a black artifact vehicle with Menace. Whenever you discard 1 or more cards, create that many tapped 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, crew 2. So I think in fair decks, in a lot of standard decks, the fact that these zombies are coming in tapped is probably just no bueno. I think this is maybe interesting as a combo card, maybe in a format like Historic or maybe Modern, though I don't know Modern as well. If you're like Necrodominancing and you're doing some sort of black-white Necrodominance deck, maybe. You're putting Guide of Souls or maybe a Yara into play, and you're just looking to go deep on a Necro, put a lot of creatures in play, trigger a lot of gain and or drain effects. Maybe this card's pretty good. In Standard, I'm more skeptical of it.
Yeah, the 2/2s entering tapped is a little bit of a problem if you're not like continuing to go after them. I don't know. It's been a little silly, but I was kind of thinking like, is there some kind of Mardu Impact Tremors deck or something that this maybe could be involved with in Standard, which once again, that's like you're potentially winning on the spot with discard with the Tremors and the War Leader's Call. But that might just be me being an insane person thinking that bad cards can be good, likely. But
yeah, the problem with this card is
you have
similar
to also
the problem
discard.
with, well, that too, but it's similar to the problem with Impact Tremors and War Leader's Calls, that they don't impact the board that much
by themselves.
And there is a risk that someone will just attack through your tapped zombies, which can't crew this thing, and kill you, or that you won't have tapped zombies until the following turn, and then tapped zombies won't untap and do anything until the turn after that. It is a cool card, though.
Yeah, I think that, yeah,
I want to like
maybe
it,
something, but the tapped thing is not where you want to be necessarily. Up next, we
another 4-mana card that doesn't impact the board immediately.
Well, unless you have a lot of zombies, no. But Cursecloth Wrappings, 2 black artifact. Zombies you control get +1/+1. Target creature card in your graveyard gains Embalm until end of turn. The Embalm cost is equal to its mana cost. So
there are some zombies in Standard. One of the 1-drops even mills you. Champion of the Parish, my friend, my precious Wudge, rotated without ever having done much of anything.
Some people were playing Champion in Standard. I don't think it ever went to a Pro Tour. But
it's me. I'm some people.
You're some people, yeah.
Champion of the Parish is a card that's still around in Pioneer, I guess. Another card that's around in Pioneer that you can actually tap this thing to Embalm when you tap out for it on turn 4 is Ornithopter. Bring back Ornithopter as a 1/3 zombie. It's cute. I don't know if it's good. Glissa is being chased out of Standard by Nowhere to Run, which makes things awkward for zombies as a creature type. Their one good card they could point to is...
well, it's not Nowhere to Runnable if you have the Cursecloth Wrappings down.
That's
Got
true.
him.
If you fade Nowhere to Run for a turn and play the Cursecloth Wrappings, then your Glissa will survive any subsequent Nowhere to Run unless they first bounce your Cursecloth Wrappings. All of this sounds extremely likely to work against the bounce deck to me.
Yes, of course. Playing 4 cost art. Yeah, no, that's definitely where you want to be against the annoying Esper deck or even the Dimir version. Who cares? They're both horrible.
Yeah, this is mostly like Necroduality or any of these sort of splashy commandery cards. It's really cool, and it makes you understand why people enjoy Commander so much, because it is probably a non-starter in Constructed, but I like it.
All right, up next we have a sick card, Demonic Junker, 6 and a black, affinity for artifacts. Vehicle 4/3. When this vehicle enters, for each player, destroy up to 1 target creature that player controls. If a creature you control was destroyed this way, put 2 1/1 counters on this vehicle. So Yeah, I mean, 1 cost removal, and
With upside.
also if you've got junk that you want to get rid of on your side of the board, you can make this a big old vehicle.
Yeah, it's cool. Like the vehicle sitting around after it's killed something, sometimes as a 6/5. It only takes 2 to crew, so pretty relevant thing to threaten with.
Yeah, your Frogmites, your Refurbished Familiars are crewing this thing.
In at least the formats where those are legal. Standard, the ability to produce a bunch of artifacts is a little more limited. You have to dig into cards like Thran Spider and Gold Pan if you want to produce 2 artifacts for 1 card, compared to other formats like even Pioneer, you have Blood Fountain, or Historic, where you have cards like Refurbished Familiar and Volta Whispers to really get going with affinity stuff.
I mean, there is Tinkerer's Tote, which makes 3 for 3 in Standard. Not the best card, but 3 artifacts for 3 is getting you close to Demonic Junker at the very least.
I had forgotten about that card. I kind of fell off with LCI Limited, but I do remember that card now that you've mentioned the name.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I want to play Affinity in Standard,
It was
so I've
very
been looking.
good. And it was very good in LCI Limited. If there are Affinity payoffs, which there are now, I can buy Tinkerer's Tote.
Yeah, I mean,
card that I
there's
forgot existed.
the blue one, too, which is the 3/4. That card seems really good in Standard, I would think, with
Memory Guardian.
Memory Guardian. Yeah, we've already talked about it, but I think that there's something here. I don't know. Watch me simulacrum synthesizer into Tinker's Tote or whatever. But yeah, it'll be fun. I think that Standard is a really cool format, even for Affinity. All right, up next we have Gas Guzzler. This guy's literally guzzling gas, so we love to see that. For
Ben Stiller here, guzzling gas. Friends are dying in a harmless gasoline fight accident. There is a blue steel deck, and it is not, in fact, blue-based Affinity.
So we've got a 1 black for a 2/1. We've got Savannah Lions again. Start your engines. This creature enters tapped, max speed, black, sacrifice another creature or vehicle, draw a card. So it's okay, you know?
You need 1-drops, you have a need for speed, you'll play this. The white 1-drop speed creature, name I'm blanking on.
The artifact that turns into another artifact when it dies.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
Is also a sacrificey creature. White-black is sort of speed sack theme in this set. So maybe this card has a home. You need to need speed, but if you do, this card is quite serviceable. If you get to max speed, being able to put half of Village Rites on a stick is pretty good. All right, next, Gastal Raider. 2 and a black. Start your engines. When this creature enters, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an instant or sorcery card from it. That player discards that card. And at max speed, it gets +1/+1 and has menace. So this compares with a card like Thoughtstalker Warlock. Like Thoughtstalker Warlock is sort of interested in pinging, oddly. So maybe they would play together. I think Duress is worse than Thoughtseize by enough that this card's mostly worse, but it could see some play.
Yeah, they don't have to lose life to do the instant or sorcery thing, but still, I think that this isn't going to see constructed play.
All right, next, Gonti, Night Minister. 2 black, legendary Aetherborn Rogue, 3/4. Whenever a player casts a spell they don't own, that player creates a treasure token. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller looks at the top card of that opponent's library and exiles it face down. They may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Mana of any type can be spent to cast a spell that way. So translated from
Commander
compliant, this turns your creatures, in 1v1, this turns your creatures basically into Ragavan.
At 4 mana, though.
Yeah, yes. An important aspect of Ragavan being good is that he costs 1 mana. I agree. 2, if you need him to have haste. But, you know, if you really like stealing things, there are cards that do that in Standard. I think this is mostly a commander card or just a fun card, but it's okay. Neat.
Yeah, I think that Laughing Jasper Flint is actually a really cool card that just like can't be played because obviously Lizards isn't strong enough in Standard, and it dies to torch, it dies to nowhere to run, all sorts of stuff. So unfortunate, but yeah, Gonti doesn't die to those things, but costs 4, and I just can't imagine a world where you'd rather drop a 4-drop that's not shielded. Like this isn't really what you're looking for, I don't think, in standard. Okay, up next we have Grim Bauble. 1 black artifact. When this artifact enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until the end of the turn. Also 2 and a black tap, sacrifice this artifact, surveil 2. So
it's a disfigure that you can pick up with Nurturing Pixie, Fear of Isolation, or their big brother Pauper All-Star Glinthawk.
Yeah,
that's good.
Core Skyfisher, all that sort of stuff. It is sorcery speed, which is a little bit tough versus Disfigure at instant speed, but artifacts are very valuable, both on the board and in the graveyard now. So we'll see what it's going to be. Just insane in draft. Like, this card's really good, but I don't know. We'll see if it's strong enough to... I mean, if you think about how the Fear of Isolation Nurturing Pixie deck kind of already goes, a lot of it's at sorcery speed, and they're playing some Tithing Blades anyway, so maybe this sees a little bit of standard play as well.
Especially if there's a version that skews more to artifact synergies instead of enchantment synergies.
Yeah, artifacts are a little bit tougher to get rid of for some colors rather than others, I guess. Yeah, cool card. We'll see how much play it sees. All right, up next is Hellish Sideswipe. 1 black sorcery has an additional cost to this spell. Sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy target creature or vehicle. If the sacrificed permanent was a vehicle, draw a card.
So we get a version of this almost every set as a black draft common. Being able to sack an artifact, I guess this one's an uncommon. This would actually be insane in Pauper, so that's probably good that
it's out of that format.
It's an uncommon, but being able to sack an artifact for this effect is a pretty big deal. We've seen Final Vengeance with enchantment sack synergies be pretty good in the decks that want it. Final Vengeance does exile, as does Eaten Alive, which is in Foundations, but if there's a deck where your sack fodder is vehicles especially, but you have a lot of artifacts that for sack fodder, this card could be very constructed playable.
Yeah, the draw card thing is also pretty cool, but the low cost,
yeah, there aren't a ton of vehicles that you're sacrificing for value.
Yeah, are you gonna sacrifice your what is that one
Last
called?
Ride.
Last Ride, yeah.
Chandra makes vehicle tokens, I guess, but yeah.
Those are 3/2s that can,
there are not a lot of vehicles that are just like junk that you care about sacrificing, and
there's the white one that's a 2/3, but that's also pretty decent. Yeah, I mean,
most of these are real things that you would sacrifice. There aren't a ton that is just gonna turn this into not just 1 mana destroy a thing, but 1 mana destroy a thing, sack something you wanted to sack anyway, draw a card. But that is a thing to keep in the back of your mind if we ever see more vehicles or anything like that.
Yeah. All right, up next we have Intimidation Tactics. For 1 black, target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose an artifact or creature card from it, exile that card. Also cycling 3. That's pretty cool,
Yeah, discard spells tend to be bad top decks late, so having a cycling buyout is a real deal. I think in a lot of times you're still going to just play Dreams of Steel and Oil anyway, especially if you're playing Ketramos, who cares about exiling, or cares about the graveyard hate aspect as well, or if you're in an older format where Dreams is sometimes both getting a card from their hand and getting a Flage from their graveyard. But in Standard, there is a deck that would be interested in some number of this effect that produces a whole lot of mana to spend redrawing off cycling 3 and doesn't necessarily care about the graveyard hate aspect of Dreams of Steel and Oil because it main decks Ghost Vacuum. And that's the sort of Free Strider Lookout, Golgari Crimes type of decks. I think this is definitely a good card there. Is going to compete with Dreams for slots across a number of formats. Card's good. Next, we have Kalakscion, Hunger Tyrant. 1 black for a legendary crocodile. Vanilla 7/2.
I don't know. I kind of love stuff like this. I get it. This sucks. This card is bad. But I just think it's so funny.
It is a card that you look at and think about how fun it would be to turn sideways and have not be blocked. It sure does trade down to grizzly bears and die to shock, though.
Yeah, and 2 black makes it unplayable. Okay, now is the Last Ride or Death Shadow at home. I mean, it has some advantages to Death Shadow, which we'll talk about, but 1 black legendary vehicle artifact. The Last Ride gets -X, where X is your life total. And then also 2 and a black, pay 2 life, draw a card, crew 2. So it has the advantage of you can just plop this on turn 1. It's not a creature until you crew it, so it doesn't die unless it is a creature. And it also has the ability to draw cards and pay life, which is also something you would want to do in a deck like this.
There is no Death Shadow in Standard or Pioneer. I don't know that Death Shadow would even be good in Standard or Pioneer.
Without fetching, it's hard, yeah.
More of a shot in Pioneer, where you at least have Thoughtseize and Shocklands. So we'll see if this produces a Shadow deck in either of those formats. I would certainly like for it too. I am a Death Shadow enjoyer. I do think that this does create sort of an interesting angle on Death Shadow, where, like you said, you can just plop it down, play a little bit more of a controlling game. You do need something to crew this, which is awkward. I talked about that a little bit when we talked about the road lands as being a way to create a pilot out of your mana base. In Pioneer, there's also my old nemesis, Reckoner Bankbuster. If you care about vehicle synergies, there's a pretty good 1 red removal spell that does. I don't know that this or Reckoner Bankbuster is a thing you're super excited to sacrifice to the spell we talked about.
One good thing about Pioneer is that while Boros Charm and Shocks exist, Lightning Bolt doesn't exist. So it's a little less likely that you're gonna throw away all your life total and then get bolted out. But yeah, I think it's a cool card. We will see at its efficacy I'm sure in older formats, you know, if you are willing to run 4 Death Shadow, probably 8's better, right? Like,
Shadow is not the greatest he's ever been in
Timeless
or Modern.
Is it banned in Historic?
It is legal in Historic, but there aren't fetches.
Shock, yeah.
So you can shock yourself a bunch, but because it's not a fetch format, your 3-color mana bases are worse. The mana bases where you can play a lot of shocks are a little less reliable. It's sort of a hard card to get exactly right, but I will certainly try this card.
All right. Up next, we have Locust Spray. For 1 black, target creature gets -1/-1 until the end of turn, cycling black.
So I kind of wanted Whispers of the Dross to be good. Like, I like these sort of -1/-1 with upside cards, but I think probably it's mostly just draft chaff. You know, the thing that would need to happen for a -1/-1 effect to be a player in Standard would be like Ragavan being legal or something. We're just so far away from needing to kill a 1 toughness thing that badly enough to put this in your deck. Even with the cycling buyout, it's probably not constructed playable, but it's close enough to the fringe that we'll talk about it. All right, here's a card that we'll see constructed play. Momentum Breaker. 1 and a black enchantment. Start your engines. When this enchantment enters, each opponent sacrifices a creature or vehicle of their choice. Each opponent who can't discards a card. Edict with upside. And then for 2, you can sack this enchantment and gain life equal to your speed. I don't think they expected the town deck to be as good as it is. I don't think it was on their radar as a thing when they designed this card. I assume they figured someone would do something with it as just a permanent with an effect this good on it. This card's going to be really good.
Goodbye, Tithing Blade. Yeah, I mean, obviously this isn't uncommon, so Pauper, no-go.
Pauper, or if you're really in on artifact synergies, Tithing Blade can still make the cut.
Make a cut, yeah, but this card is really good. I mean, Edict or discard. Really powerful.
Edict when they have stuff and discard when they don't.
And also the ability
wild.
to gain, 4 life or whatever is pretty good. If you don't need this thing anymore, you've got your Otter talent lock with the nowhere to run or something, and you don't need this one.
Yeah, and it's just a food.
Just a food, that's really good card. Okay, up next we have Risky Shortcut, 2 and a black, sorcery, draw 2 cards, each player loses 2 life.
We see these sort of read the bones effects all the time. 3 mana is a lot, sorcery speed is rough. The best of the existing ones that is not played that much is Shadow Prophecy, which goes a little deeper and can get domain and is instant speed. This at least also hurts your opponent, so that's something.
Yeah, helpful with speed and stuff if that's what you're trying to do.
These cards are pretty rough and constructed. This one is close enough that you can look at it and say maybe.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, this is not a card you need to say maybe to.
This is a card you look at and say yes.
Quag Feast, 1 and a black, sorcery, choose target creature, planeswalker, or vehicle, mill 2 cards, and destroy the chosen permanent if its mana value is less than or equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. So you're trying to fill your graveyard. It is sorcery speed, but oftentimes you want to cast kill spells at sorcery speed anyway, because you don't want to let them untap for protection or whatever. Card's cool.
Yeah, sorcery speed has been a problem for cards like our beloved Drown and Ichor, or a card like Fell, but I think the upside is here on this one, where it is enough of Doomblade with upside that being sorcery speed is not going to be a deal breaker in a deck that cares about the graveyard.
Yeah, the ability to get planeswalkers and vehicle is also not negligible.
Oh yeah. This isn't even Doomblade. This is Hero's Downfall with upside for 2 mana.
So pretty gas. There's any number of decks are looking for you to play this card if you care about the graveyard, which graveyard's quite powerful. So it's great alongside Overlord of the Bale Merc and all sorts of stuff. So we'll see a lot of play from this card.
All right, next, Shefet Archfiend. 5 and 2 black, 5/5 flying demon. When it enters, all other creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn, and it cycles for 2. This is sort of like a Massacre Worm, or sort of like alchemy card Perforating Crocodile, in that it cycles itself to get itself into the graveyard. It's also a demon. I think its power level is probably not there in Constructed, unless you really care about the demon type. You'd have to be like some sort of mono black reanimator interested in getting Valgavoth back, that is looking to play cards like Annex, but also cards like maybe Demonic Council, not necessarily being able to get Delirium all the time. So you want the demon tutor as a buyout for when it's not demonic tutor.
Yeah, I think that it's a little
fringe.
Pretty fringe, and Unholy Annex's stock went way down in Standard as of recent, and I don't really see it coming back. There's just so many things to do against it with the bounce spells.
Yeah, 6/6
and like
flying
even
token against a bounce spell being one of the most played cards in the format is rough.
Plus just bouncing the Annex, even if you Sheltered by Ghosts the Annex, even if you killed the thing, spending the ward cost, you still have to pay again to get any of the abilities online for your Unholy Annex Ritual Chamber. I don't think this card sees any play anywhere other than limited, but Unholy Annex always can sit in the back and maybe have a return. It is a pretty good card.
All right, another card that's suffering from Unholy Annex's decline in stock is the Speed Demon. 3 and 2 black, legendary demon, 5/5 flying trample. Start your engines, and at the beginning of your end step, draw X cards and lose X life, where X is your speed. So if we return to a standard where Unholy Annex was good, if you have an Unholy Annex, you play this thing, even if you're just starting your engines with that. You stack the triggers, the Unholy Annex hurts them because it drains them. That gets your speed to 2, and you're drawing 2 cards and losing 2 life when you just gained 2 life and drew a card. So you're drawing 3 cards. That's pretty good. In Pioneer, where Unholy Annex is better positioned, being a 5/5 and costing 5 might be a deal breaker. One of the things that's so good about Archfiend of the Dross is that it does not die to Lightning Axe and costs 1 less mana than this.
This does die to Lightning Axe.
Yes.
Yeah, so kind of rough.
There's also Momentum Breaker. Another card that can gain you some life is a just pretty pretty good removal spell and can get your engine started before this thing comes down. So it has a shot if it's positioned right in standard.
I mean, if you're mono black, you could play the lands too and just get your engines going early. But yeah, I agree. This card is cool, but maybe a little risky.
Next, just a couple of kinda bad artifact creatures. Wreckage, Wickerfolk, and Wretched Doll. A 1/3 flyer that ETB surveils 2, and a 3/1 non-flyer that can tap and spend a black to surveil 1. I think you really need to care about artifact creature typing, and you need to be in a very weird color, like maybe mono black. Even then, these are both worse than Osseous Stick Twister from Duskmourn. But if you're in some sort of mono black aggro artifact deck, maybe. Probably not.
Yeah, I don't really see these cards as very playable. Obviously, a 3/1 is fine if you're drafting. A 1/3 is also not great in this format, as there are 3/2s, and it's okay against the 4/1, but it's still a trade, you know? So I don't know. Don't listen to me for draft advice anyway. But yeah, I don't really see these cards as doing anything. So that's it for our black cards. Like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you would use these cards in the comments.